As you can see, we kept our promise. We are here today. We're 2 out of 3.
Teleworking started in the USA with the teleworking work. The work aimed at attaining as less movement of the workers as possible. He was considered, therefore, the inspirator. The pandemic took humanity by surprise, and definitely made great need to find ways and measures so as not to have the collapse of economy. Thus, although in many countries teleworking was disseminated for many years, that was not the case in our country. We have the honor to have with us Madam Thalia Vouvonikou, who's head of the Henkel for Greece and Cyprus, and Mr. Andreas Vouros, who is Managing Director of Thrive Global Greece. Mr. Vouros, do you agree that the pandemic was the reason for the new reality in the Greek labor market?
I will put it differently. The pandemic was a catalyst that accelerated the developments, which, of course, had started before the pandemic. I believe that these developments can be described as some tectonic changes, tectonic movements in the way that the market operates, but also in our lives. Now, which are these developments, these major changes? I believe that the basic features are, first of all, the existence of telework, e-work, that existed since the 70s and which was becoming more widespread. The second very important feature was the e-commerce that has changed the perception we have. We are now, in other words, more willing to buy online. We don't necessarily have to go to the store. And all of these features, all of these changes were accelerated due to the pandemic. However, the fact that they pre-existed the pandemic allowed us to manage the pandemic a bit more effectively. Imagine how we would have managed the pandemic if we weren't familiar with these means. For example, if we didn't have the supply chains already developed, if we didn't have the e-commerce, which, as I said, pre-existed the pandemic. Okay, as I said, the developments were accelerated due to the pandemic, but still we were in the position to use them to our benefit. So, Ms. Vouvonikou, do you believe that e-work was not something new for Greece? I believe that when it comes to the majority of Greek businesses, what was unprecedented was the way that e-work was imposed. It was a universal choice that we had to accept. I believe that most Greek businesses were not ready for this universal adoption of e-work because of the fact that most of them were operating on the basis of physical interaction with their employees. Most of the companies used extensively paper, and their digitalization was not to the extent that was required. However, there were certain types of work and certain models of work that had been used by other European companies, especially multinational companies. These examples were followed by other small businesses in order to ensure business continuity. So, from the side of the business, and especially human resources department, Could you tell us which have been the major challenges of this new model of work? I believe that the most important challenge was productivity. How do we measure productivity? And secondly, how can we work productively as we did before the pandemic? The experience of the last 18 months has shown that the employees who were more autonomous, more independent, employees who didn't need the guidance of the supervisors due to the position in the company, these were the employees that increased the level of productivity thanks to this model of work. In other words, this model of work fitted perfectly these employees. Now, other employees who were used to listen to the guidance of the supervisors were the ones that faced the most difficulties. They were the ones that got tired faster. And that is why what was very important was the leader. The leader was the one who could actually provide solutions to these difficulties, guide the team more effectively, and ensure more freedom for the employees. A second major challenge, I believe, was the work-life balance between professional and personal life. Due to telework, the time between personal and professional life became one and the same. The result of that being that people never disconnected from their work. Now, this challenge gave the impression that this was a fact, but then the people expressed their will to separate the two, and it was then that the human resources supervisor came into play and tried to provide solutions to this problem. It was the human resources directors who took a more personal stance. They got to know their employees better, and this is how they developed the new culture, which is based on caring for the other. And I believe that this was a positive result of the pandemic. In other words, due to the pandemic, we got far from one another, but due to the problems that emerged, we then decided to get to know one another better. Ms. Vouvonikou talked about productivity and work-life balance. Could you give us some best practices or solutions that we could propose to the business world that is watching us?
Yes, it is true that this new reality has greatly changed the way companies should approach the issue of productivity. The way they will secure and measure this productivity. I would like to remain and elaborate the issue of well-being, and which is extremely important, has been demonstrated as the most flagrant one. It is a necessary constituent for productivity. A person who is under constant stress, who doesn't keep the boundaries between professional and private life, will not be that engaged with his work and therefore could not be really productive. And that will also entail losses in the person's productivity. Therefore, there is a chain that must be secured by the companies, by the organizations, for their people to be well, to feel well during remote working, so as to be able to respond. Therefore, the organizations, companies must find solutions, and they still haven't to the greatest possible degree, so as to respond to the problems appearing out of this new reality and serve and protect the employees. For instance, HR department must think of how they will solve problems of mobility and sociability are important. They must see what are the problems that are exacerbated through teleworking. For instance, the employee must also handle the children of the house who are also educated digitally. They must be helped in a way. Another issue raised by Thalia is that lack of boundaries between personal and professional time. Big companies, multinationals, for instance, a European car manufacturer, for instance, has introduced an excellent solution, to my view. They have set the emails in a way that any email leaving for the employees, addressed to employees, to remain in the company server at beyond a certain time limit. Therefore, the email will be viewed by the final recipient, but in the morning, not after 6 o'clock in the afternoon, for instance. Therefore, in an indirect way, the company has shown to the employees how they must distinguish their personal lives from their professional career and how they can observe limits. And another issue concerning measurement of productivity, there were certain KPIs which were not very effective for work 9 to 5. This is non-existent, has no sense now. Therefore, we must see and must review these KPIs that should be real on a project or on a work basis, not on hours basis, for instance. Yes, this is what we said. We should assess the work, not the hours dedicated for this work. That is, check the substantial delivery of the work. Nice. Now let us view another important element that has been greatly stressed during this teleworking. This is the issue of culture, because now culture is no longer defined by the office space, by the code of conduct. Perhaps we should redefine it. Madam Vouvonikou, what is the response of HR on this subject? What you refer perhaps is the biggest challenge, because culture is built up very slowly and must be handled and maintained in the companies. The HR world has reacted in more or less the same practices as a single body. They use the path of continuous communication with information, emails, to the people working remotely, through trainings that spoke of handling the crisis, through e-learnings, with many well-being actions which became digital, such as a digital gym that we saw in many companies as a response. At the end of the day, we saw those events, all events, even Christmas festivities, to be affected remotely. All corporate gifts took the form of door-to-door delivery. Thus, we try to secure a seamless communication to show that we're still there and that we care, and we try to make our people feel safe within this uncertainty ambience, have the protective umbrella of the company. HR people were at the front line that had to make the people feel nice. And what I said beforehand, this culture of I care, that is, view the particular problems of each family through this crisis, which were not identical and were many. At the end of the day, I believe that this culture, I care, and human-centered approach, which is the approach of the future, and the one that the new generation of leaders must apply and follow, in combination with the adaptability that we should all have, and the motto that we remain a team, well, no matter where we are, will be the three main pillars of the future culture. I firmly believe that companies are its people. Of course, headquarters, offices, walls, and decor play a role, but companies are its people, and it's people that they sustain the companies. Mr. Vouros, we don't have much time. I would like a last comment from you. Yes. With the abolition of the quota of teleworking, many companies bring back their personnel 100%. Do you believe that there will be an insistence on this paradigm? No, I believe we are still in the middle, in the eye of the tiger. The reactions from both sides are more intense than what is needed. I believe that we conclude in a future where there will be a hybrid model. Now, to what ratio and what form precisely, I cannot know. You have to wait and see. But definitely have them, all the people back in the offices from a hybrid model, I believe is no case. We are not going back to the previous status quo. That's for sure. I merely wanted to add something to what Thalia was saying. Organizations, companies should not be afraid to take human-centered initiatives during pandemics, even if they see they don't have the appropriate quota of participation. The message sent by the company with such initiatives is a very basic tool for the maintenance of the company culture. Thank you. Excellent. Warmly thank you. We thank our excellent guests. We close this session on the theme of e-work.